Hi everyone, welcome to this video about employment verification from ACCSC. Today we're going to go over which standards require employment verification, what a complete employment verification file contains, which classifications require what verifications, what's required to be in your employment verification policy, and how to check that your files are complete. We'll start with the standards. Standards state that a school must demonstrate successful student achievement by maintaining acceptable rates of graduation and employment. For a school to demonstrate accurate employment rates, the school must maintain verifiable records of initial employment of their graduates. So, what's in these records? All of this should be present in your graduate's employment verification file. You'll find this in Appendix 7. Things required are graduate name and contact information, program name, date of graduation, date of initial employment, place of employment, employer address, employer contact information, as well as a descriptive job title and job duties. Now, how can you be sure that you collect all that stuff? A good policy and procedure. Your policy and procedure should include information as to how and when you conduct verifications. It should also explain how a school determines whether employment is consistent and sustainable, as well as how the school determines whether the employment is directly related to the program from which the individual graduated. Now, what types of employment are in the standards? The standards include 3 classifications of employment. You can also find this in Appendix 7. Each one has a different requirement for what constitutes verification of that employment. We'll start with regular employment. Regular employment is going to be by far the majority of the employment verification you will do. This is when the graduate is employed in the field by an employer. To verify this employment, the school needs to obtain written verification either from the employer or from the graduate. Next would be self-employment. This is when a graduate is working in the field for themselves. The school would need to obtain written verification that also includes an attestation that the work being done is based on the education received at the institution, and an attestation that the graduate is earning training-related income. Also, if licensure is required in this field, there must also be an attestation that licensure has been achieved. The third classification for employment is career support or advancement. This is when a graduate is already employed in the field at the time of training. This is not for when a student gets an externship in their program and then is hired out of that externship. This classification is meant to gather students who were already employed at the time they started their training or spent a significant portion of their training employed in the field. These students must get regular written verification, as well as have an attestation that says that training allowed the graduate to maintain their employment, or it allowed them to have some sort of advancement, whether that is pay or position title. So let's talk about written verification. Written verification is what it says it is. It's written. Graduates or employers must submit written confirmation of the following information: date of initial employment, place of employment, descriptive job title, and duties. So if you remember that long list of things that must be in a graduate's file, these 3 things are what need to actually be verified by the graduate or the employer. You'll note at the bottom of this slide that written verification can be done through many different ways, but the school must have a trail of communication if all of the verification is done in type. This can include things like emails or messaging platforms. ACCSC does not require an inked signature, but we do want to ensure that the information we are being presented with is from the graduate or the employer. The next type of verification is verbal verification. Verbal verification can only be used when a diligent effort has been made to secure written verification. ACCSC does not define diligent effort, but the school must be able to provide evidence that they have made a diligent effort before resorting to verbal verification. Verbal verification must be done with both the graduate and the employer, and a staff member of the institution must attest in writing to each of those verbal verifications. There is no verbal verification allowed for the classifications of self-employment or career advancement classifications because those require written attestations. Now we'll talk about what constitutes an in-field job placement. ACCSC only considers in-field placements for the employment rate. Therefore, a school must determine what placements are in the field of training. Sometimes it's incredibly obvious. a medical assistant program, graduate becomes a medical assistant. But sometimes it is not that obvious. In those cases where it is not very clear whether the position title is actually related to the training that the student received at the institution, you must provide additional information. This can be job duties, a job posting, or other things that explain that that student is engaging in work that is related to their training. Now, let's talk about some double check questions that you can ask yourself related to your files before you submit anything to ACCSC. Does your verification policy have a set time frame for when to verify employment? And does that time frame indicate sustainability? So, if a school were to verify employment on the same day that the student began their employment, they would not be able to demonstrate sustainability of that position for that graduate. So you want to make sure that you have a time frame for verification that allows for the school to demonstrate that that job is sustainable for the student. Are the employment positions clearly related to the education provided by the school? If not, is there documentation to demonstrate that these positions are in-field placements? If the forms are completed electronically, is there a digital signature or correspondence demonstrating who completed the forms? If the school utilizes employment verification forms, we want to be sure that we understand when we're reviewing these student files that the person who completed the forms was either the graduate or the employer. So you want to make sure that if an outside entity were to review these files, that they would understand who completed those forms. Are all necessary attestations completed for self-employment and career advancement placements? These students will not just revert to being classified as regular employment. Students must fill out the attestations to be considered verified and employed in their field. If a verbal verification is used, is it with both the employer and the graduate? And is there documentation showing diligent efforts to obtain written documentation? These questions will help you align your files with some of the more common mistakes that we see here at ACCSC when we review employment verification documentation. Now, if you still need help, feel free to call or email us. The information is at the bottom of the screen. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope employment verification just got a little bit easier.